Commander Velthor's massive form cast a shadow across the docking bay as the human transport ship settled onto the metal platform with a gentle hiss. Steam rose from its landing thrusters, and the cargo ramp descended with mechanical precision. The Krex Empire's finest mercenary commander had seen countless species board his vessels over the decades, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. 5 figures emerged from the transport, and Velthor's 4 eyes widened in disbelief. These were the legendary humans he'd heard whispered about in the Outer Rim taverns. They looked like children compared to his towering frame. His scaled hide, thick as starship armor, could have crushed any one of them with a casual movement. Yet something in their posture made him pause. The female led the group with confident strides. Hannah moved with fluid precision, her dark hair pulled back in a practical style, her eyes scanning the docking bay with the intensity of a seasoned scout. Behind her, 4 males followed in formation. Taman carried himself like a natural leader. Duhayan's calculating gaze missed nothing, while Wujin and Jeho flanked the group like silent guardians. Morgax, the unit's heavy assault specialist, let out a rumbling laugh that echoed through the bay. The beast warrior stood nearly 3 meters tall, his muscular frame covered in natural armor plates that had evolved over millions of years. Bone spikes jutted from his shoulders and forearms, weapons that could pierce through reinforced steel. His yellow eyes, each the size of a human fist, gleamed with predatory amusement. "Commander, surely this is some kind of joke?" Morgox growled, his voice like grinding stone. "These pale creatures look like they'd break if I'd breathed on them. Too hard? Where are their claws? Their natural weapons? How did they even survive on their homeworld?" Velthor shared his lieutenant's confusion, but maintained his professional composure. His mandibles clicked thoughtfully as he watched the humans methodically unload their equipment. Their weapons were puzzling, simple tubes of metal and polymer. That seemed almost primitive compared to the energy weapons his other warriors carried. The Sithkari warriors in his unit possessed razor-sharp exoskeletons that could slice through plasma conduits. The Venom Lords from Kepler Prime could spit acid that dissolved titanium in seconds. His psychic warriors from Proxima 7 could crush minds with a thought, driving enemies insane before they ever fired a shot. Each species had evolved for warfare, carrying deadly gifts written into their very DNA. But these humans carried nothing more dangerous than projectile weapons that fired small metal fragments. Velthor had studied the technical specifications, bullets they called them. Primitive, chemical propulsion systems that seemed laughably outdated in an age of plasma cannons and particle beams. Perhaps their support personnel, suggested Krixta, one of his Sithkari scouts. Her chitinous exterior gleamed under the bay lights, and her compound eyes tracked the humans' movements with predatory interest. Medical staff or engineers? They certainly don't look like frontline fighters. Velthor activated his communication array, and his voice boomed across the assembled warriors. 23 of the galaxy's most dangerous mercenaries turned their attention to him. Creatures that had carved their names into legend across 100 battlefields. Warriors, we have received our next assignment. The mining colony of Kepler 4-4-B has come under attack by Raider forces. Intelligence estimates their numbers at approximately 300 hostiles, equipped with standard military hardware and supported by orbital bombardment capabilities. A chorus of roars and battle cries erupted from his assembled troops. Venom Lords hissed with anticipation, their acid sacs swelling with excitement. The psychic warriors' eyes began to glow with otherworldly energy, and the Sithkari warriors clicked their blade limbs together in rhythmic patterns. "Our objective is simple," Velthor continued. "Hold the mining facility until reinforcement fleets arrive. Estimated timeline 18 hours. Failure is not acceptable." As his warriors began boarding the assault transport, Velthor noticed something peculiar about the human team. While his other soldiers engaged in their pre-battle rituals, roaring challenges, displaying their natural weapons, or entering combat trances, the 5 humans sat together in quiet conversation. They weren't showing fear, exactly, but they also weren't displaying the aggressive excitement he expected from warriors. Instead, they seemed almost contemplative, speaking in low, measured tones while reviewing data tablets and checking their equipment with methodical precision. Tae-Min was cleaning his weapon with practiced movements, each action deliberate and efficient. Du-Hyen studied tactical displays on a portable screen, his fingers tracing probable attack routes in defensive positions. Woojin and Jae-Ho worked together to organize ammunition and supplies, their coordination suggesting years of partnership. The transport shuddered as they lifted off from the command carrier, heading toward the besieged mining colony. Most of Velthor's warriors either meditated or continued their aggressive displays, but the humans remained focused on preparation rather than intimidation. Hannah rose from her seat and approached Velthor's command position. Her movement was steady, despite the transport's vibrations. And when she spoke, her voice carried quiet confidence that surprised him. "Commander, we'll need complete facility blueprints, geological surveys of the surrounding terrain, and detailed reports from the previous 3 raider attacks, also communication frequencies used by both the miners and any orbital platforms in the system." Velthor's mandibles clicked in confusion. And for decades of commanding mercenary operations, no warrior had ever approached him with such requests. His fighters typically wanted to know one thing: where to point their weapons. They relied on instinct, natural aggression, and overwhelming force to achieve victory, intelligence reports, he rumbled. "My warriors don't require such ... preparations. We identify the enemy and eliminate them. Simple and effective." Edge of his consciousness, there was something unsettling about the way these humans approached warfare. Not with savage joy or bloodthirsty anticipation, but with the calm professionalism of technicians preparing to solve a complex problem. The red dawn of Kepler 442b painted the mining colony in shades of rust and blood. Massive extraction towers pierced the barren landscape like metallic fingers, their drill heads boring deep into the planet's mineral-rich core. Steam vents hissed between rocky outcroppings, creating a maze of natural cover across the industrial wasteland. Velthar crouched behind the colony's main command bunker, his 4 eyes scanning the horizon through enhanced optics. The raider fleet had arrived exactly as intelligence predicted, 50 assault craft descending like angry wasps, their engines screaming through the thin atmosphere. Plasma fire began raining down on the facility's outer defenses, turning metal barriers into molten slag, all warriors' defensive positions. Velthor's voice boomed across the communication network. "Show these scavengers what real fighters can do." The response was immediate and terrifying. Morgax led the charge with a bone-chilling roar that echoed off the canyon walls. His massive frame bounded across the rocky terrain, bone blades extending from his forearms like natural swords. Behind him, the Sithkari warriors moved in perfect formation, their razor-sharp exoskeletons clicking in deadly rhythm. The Venom Lords took elevated positions on the mining towers, their acid sacs pulsing with deadly anticipation. When the first wave of raiders came within range, they unleashed streams of corrosive death that dissolved enemy armor on contact. The psychic warriors from Proxima 7 stood motionless, their eyes glowing with otherworldly power as they reached into enemy minds, turning raiders against their own allies. It was a display of raw, primal warfare that had dominated battlefields across the galaxy for centuries. Each species fought with the weapons evolution had given them, turning their very bodies into instruments of destruction. But the humans did something completely different. Fall back to secondary positions. Taemin's voice cut through the chaos with calm authority. Instead of charging forward like the other warriors, the 5 humans immediately began a coordinated retreat toward a cluster of storage containers. Near the facility's power plant, Velthor watched in growing disgust as they ducked and weaved between cover points, avoiding direct confrontation with the advancing raiders. When plasma bolts seared the air around them, they dropped flat and crawled rather than standing and fighting. Their movements seemed cowardly, almost shameful compared to the glorious battle cries of his other warriors. "Pathetic," he muttered, watching Hannah slide behind a concrete barrier as enemy fire turned the air above her into a light show of deadly energy. They run at the first sign of real combat. Meanwhile, Morgax was in his element. the massive beast warrior crashed into the first line of raiders like a living battering ram. His bone blades sliced through enemy weapons and armor with contemptuous ease, while his thick hide absorbed plasma bolts that would have killed lesser beings. 3 raiders fell to his assault in the first 30 seconds, their bodies torn apart by claws that could rend starship holes. "Where are the soft skins?" Morgax bellowed between kills, his yellow eyes scanning the battlefield, hiding like frightened cubs while real warriors do the fighting. The Sithkari warriors had formed a defensive line near the main entrance, their compound eyes tracking multiple targets simultaneously. Their natural weapons, blade limbs that could extend and retract at will, created a wall of death that no raider could penetrate. Each movement was precise, economical, honed by millions of years of evolutionary warfare. But something strange was happening across the battlefield. Despite the overwhelming display of alien combat prowess, the raider advance was beginning to falter. Their tight formations, which should have overwhelmed the defenders through sheer numbers, were breaking apart into confused clusters. Velthar noticed it first in their communications. The raider command frequencies, which had been crisp and coordinated at the start of the battle, were now filled with contradictory orders and panicked reports. Squad leaders were calling for support from units that weren't there, while others reported enemy positions that made no tactical sense. Unit 7, fall back to grid reference Alpha 9. A raider commander's voice crackled through the intercepted communications. Negative command, Alpha 9 is compromised. We've got hostiles in the mining tunnels. Impossible. Our sensors show no enemy activity in that sector. But the confusion was spreading like a virus through their ranks. Supply convoys that should have been protected by overlapping fields of fire were suddenly coming under attack from unexpected angles. Communication relays were going offline one by one, leaving entire battalions isolated and blind. Then came the explosions. The first blast lit up the northern ridge, where the raiders had established their ammunition depot. The explosion was massive, sending debris high into the thin atmosphere and creating a mushroom cloud that could be seen for kilometers. Secondary explosions followed as stored energy cells and plasma charges cooked off in chain reactions. How did their ammunition depot explode? Velthar muttered, his tactical display showing the devastating damage to enemy logistics. That position was supposed to be secure through his enhanced scope. He caught a glimpse of movement in the mining tunnels that honeycombed the colony's underground sections. 2 figures moved through the shadows with fluid precision, Woojin and Jeho, now their human forms barely visible in the darkness. Their weapons spat brief, controlled bursts of fire, each shot placed with mechanical accuracy. Unlike his other warriors who fought with overwhelming force and natural fury, these humans moved like surgical instruments, striking only when and where it would cause maximum disruption. A raider communications officer fell to a single precise shot. An enemy demolitions expert collapsed while preparing charges, his explosives scattering harmlessly across the tunnel floor. Each human bullet found its mark with efficiency that defied their primitive appearance. The battle raged for 3 hours, and when the raider first wave finally retreated to regroup, Velthar surveyed the aftermath with growing unease. 6 of his warriors lay dead or seriously wounded, brave fighters who had charged directly into enemy fire with nothing but their natural weapons and warrior instincts. But the humans remained untouched. All 5 of them emerged from their positions, without a scratch, their equipment intact, and their ammunition carefully conserved. They moved with the same calm professionalism they had shown on the transport, checking their weapons and comparing notes on enemy movements. Luck, Morgax spat, pressing a field dressing against a plasma burn that had seared through his natural armor. Green blood seeped through the bandage, and his yellow eyes blazed with pain and frustration. The soft skins hid in their holes, while real warriors shed blood for victory. But Velthar studied his tactical displays with growing concern. The battlefield data told a different story than what his eyes had seen. While his monsters had engaged in glorious direct combat, taking and dealing massive damage, the humans had systematically dismantled the enemy's ability to fight effectively. Their ammunition depot was gone. Their communications network was in chaos. Supply lines were severed, command structure was fractured, and morale was plummeting. The raider force that had arrived with overwhelming numerical superiority was now reduced to scattered. Confused units stumbling around a battlefield they no longer understood, a cold realization settled in. Velthor's stomach like a lump of ice. The humans hadn't been hiding during the battle. They had been hunting. And their prey hadn't been individual enemy soldiers, it had been the enemy's entire ability to wage war. The sky above Kepler 4-4 to be turned black as death itself. 300 raider ships blotted out the red sun, their hulls gleaming like the shells of predatory insects. The sound was overwhelming, a mechanical thunder that shook the ground and rattled the mining equipment. Dropships descended in perfect formation, each one disgorging 20 heavily armed soldiers onto the rocky terrain. Velthor's enhanced vision tracked the enemy deployment with growing dread.
Wave
After wave of raiders poured from their transports, spreading across the landscape like a metallic plague. Their weapons glowed with charged energy, and their armor bore the scars of countless victories. These weren't desperate pirates or opportunistic scavengers, they were professional soldiers. With military-grade equipment and disciplined tactics, all units fall back to the central hub. Velthor's voice boomed across the communication network. His remaining 17 warriors, bloodied but still fighting, began a tactical withdrawal toward the mining facility's heart. The massive structure rose from the planet's surface like a technological mountain, its reinforced walls designed to withstand the pressures of deep core extraction. Morgax limped beside him, his earlier confidence replaced by grim determination. The beast warrior's natural armor was cracked in 3 places, green blood seeping through the gaps. Even his incredible strength had limits, and the first wave had pushed those limits to the breaking point. "Commander, we cannot hold this position." Velthor transmitted to all units, his tactical computers calculating impossible odds. "The central hub is surrounded. We need to retreat to the emergency bunkers and wait for negative." Commander Duhayen's voice cut through the chaos with startling clarity. The human's tone was calm, almost conversational despite the sound of explosions and weapons fire. In the background, "We hold here." Velthor's mandibles clicked in disbelief. "Are you insane? You're outnumbered 15-1. My warriors are trained killers with natural weapons, and even we can't face those odds." "We've had worse odds," came the simple reply. Before Velthor could respond, the orbital bombardment began. Energy beams lanced down from the raider fleet like spears of pure destruction, turning sections of the mining facility into molten craters. The humans' defensive positions disappeared in clouds of superheated vapor and flying debris. Velthor watched in horror as Hannah's team vanished into the inferno. One moment they were crouched behind reinforced barriers, and the next they were swallowed by explosions that could vaporize starship armor. Smoke and dust filled the air, blocking his enhanced vision and overwhelming his sensors. "The soft skins are gone," Morgax growled, his yellow eyes reflecting the fires burning across the facility. Vaporized like insects. 2 of Velthor's best Sithkari warriors, Krixta and Velmer, had taken defensive positions near the main entrance. Their exoskeletons, which had deflected energy weapons for years, suddenly cracked under concentrated fire from raider-heavy weapons. The compounds that made their natural armor nearly indestructible simply couldn't withstand the focused assault of military-grade plasma cannons. Krixta's final transmission was a war cry that echoed across the battlefield before her position was overrun. Velmer managed 3 more kills before a raider demolition charge reduced him to scattered fragments. The enemy advance was unstoppable. Professional soldiers moved in coordinated formations, their weapons fire creating overlapping fields of death that no living creature could survive. They advanced with mechanical precision, clearing each defensive position with textbook efficiency. Then something impossible happened. The raiders' front line, which had been moving forward like an unstoppable machine, suddenly ground to a halt. Confused shouts filled their communication frequencies as squads began firing in random directions. Officers screamed contradictory orders while their soldiers spun in circles, unable to identify friend from foe. Explosions began blooming throughout the raider formations, not from orbital strikes or defensive positions, but from within their own ranks. Ammunition supplies detonated without warning. Communication relays sparked and died in showers of sparks. Vehicles that had been advancing suddenly reversed direction, their drivers apparently receiving urgent retreat orders. "How are they?" Velthar began, then stopped mid-sentence. Movement in the smoke caught his enhanced vision. Figure emerged from what should have been a crater. Taman, his uniform torn and stained with blood but very much alive. Psst. In his hands was a weapon that defied classification, a hybrid construction of mining laser components, raider plasma conduits, and human ingenuity. The device hummed with barely contained energy, its cobbled-together components somehow working in perfect harmony. Taman raised it toward a group of raiders who were trying to establish a forward command post, and the beam that emerged carved through their position like a sword through paper. Behind him, Wu Jin dragged a wounded raider officer whose armor had been modified with human electronics. Wires and circuit boards were grafted onto the alien technology, creating connections that shouldn't have been possible with battlefield resources. Commander Hannah's voice crackled through the communication system. As clear and calm as if she were sitting in a comfortable briefing room instead of the middle of a war zone, "We've secured their command frequency. It's currently feeding false orders to their 3rd and 7th battalions." Velthar's tactical display showed something that violated every law of warfare he understood. The raider forces, which had been advancing in perfect coordination just moments before, were now turning their weapons on each other. Squad leaders were ordering attacks on their own support units. Artillery crews were targeting their own infantry based on coordinates that made no strategic sense. "Impossible," Morgax breathed, his massive form trembling with exhaustion and awe. "They should be dead. We all saw the bombardment. Nothing could survive that." But the humans weren't just alive, they were everywhere. Jeho appeared on a mining tower that had been abandoned hours earlier, his weapon picking off raider snipers with surgical precision. Du Haiyan emerged from a maintenance tunnel directly behind enemy lines, placing explosive charges on critical equipment before vanishing back into the facility's underground maze. The raiders, who had arrived with overwhelming superiority and professional discipline, were being systematically destroyed by an enemy they couldn't see, couldn't track, and couldn't understand. Their own technology was being turned against them, their communications were compromised, and their tactical advantage was dissolving like smoke in the wind. Velthar realized with growing amazement that the humans hadn't been caught in the orbital bombardment, they had used it. The explosions and smoke had provided perfect cover for them to relocate, to acquire enemy equipment, and to position themselves. Throughout the battlefield like pieces on a game board, they weren't fighting the raiders with superior firepower or natural weapons. They were fighting them with something far more dangerous: superior intelligence, adaptability, and a terrifying refusal to accept defeat, even when death seemed certain. The battle that should have ended in minutes was turning into a nightmare for the attacking force. The humans were just getting started. The 6th hour of battle brought a revelation that shattered everything Velthar thought he knew about warfare. The mining facility had become a graveyard of twisted metal and broken stone, but within this chaos, the humans moved like they owned the battlefield. Every explosion, every piece of fallen debris, every disabled vehicle had become part of their arsenal. Velthar crouched behind the remnants of a processing unit, watching in fascination as Hannah knelt beside a dead raider communications officer. Her hands moved with surgical precision, extracting circuit boards and data cores from the alien's equipment. Within minutes, she had integrated the components into her own communication array, creating a hybrid system that gave her access to enemy frequencies. 3rd Battalion advanced to Sector 7. She spoke into the modified device, her voice perfectly, mimicking the raider commander's accent and speech patterns. "Heavy resistance has been neutralized." On Velthar's tactical display, he watched an entire enemy unit change direction, marching directly into a kill zone that Wu Jin had prepared using nothing but mining explosives and repurposed industrial equipment. The explosion that followed took out 20 raiders in a single devastating blast. This wasn't just battlefield scavenging. It was technological adaptation at a speed that defied logic. Every piece of equipment the humans touched became something: New, something more dangerous than its original design. They didn't just use tools. They transformed them into weapons of war. Jeho suddenly sprinted past Velthor's position, his small frame moving with desperate urgency. He was covered in dust and alien blood, his uniform torn in a dozen places, but his eyes burned with fierce determination. In his arms, he carried what appeared to be a standard Raider plasma cannon. But Velthor's enhanced vision caught the modifications immediately. Human electronics had been grafted onto the weapon's power core, creating connections that violated every principle of alien engineering. Wires and circuit boards formed a web of hybrid technology that somehow managed to channel the plasma flow through pathways that shouldn't have existed. "Cover me for 30 seconds, Jeho shouted, sliding behind a concrete barrier as enemy fire turned the air around him into a light show of death. Morgax, despite his earlier contempt for the softskins, immediately opened fire with his natural weapons. His bone blades extended to their full length, deflecting plasma bolts while his thick hide absorbed the impacts. "Ow, the beast warriors." Yellow eyes blazed with newfound respect as he provided the covering fire Jeho needed. 30 seconds later, the hybrid weapon erupted in a beam of pure energy that should have been impossible. The plasma stream, enhanced by human modifications, punched through the armored hull of a Raider dropship like it was made of paper. The vessel's power core detonated, creating a fireball that consumed 3 other ships in its expanding radius. "How did you?" Morgax started, his voice filled with awe. "Your people fight with what evolution gave you," Duhayan replied, his hands never stopping as he reloaded his weapon with movements that had become second nature. "We fight with what we make." The statement hit Velthor like a physical blow. For millions of years, the galaxy's warrior races had relied on their natural advantages. The Sithkari had their razor exoskeletons, the Venom Lords had their acid production, the Psychic Warriors had their mental powers. Yes. Each species was locked into fighting with the tools their evolution had provided, but humans had no such limitations. They took whatever was available and transformed it into something better, something deadlier, something that served their immediate needs. A mining laser became a precision weapon. A communication array became a tool of deception. A pile of scrap metal became a devastating explosive device. Velthor watched Hannah orchestrate the defense with precision that put his veteran warriors to shame. She processed information from multiple sources simultaneously, intercepted enemy communications. Battlefield reports from her team, sensor data from the facility's remaining systems, and visual intelligence from observation points throughout the complex. Her tactical awareness was superhuman. She knew the location of every enemy unit, the status of every piece of equipment, and the condition of every defensive position. But more than that, she understood how all these elements fit together in the larger pattern of battle. Taman. Enemy sniper team moving to grid reference Echo 4. Range 400 meters. Wind speed 12 kilometers per hour from the northwest. Confirmed, adjusting for environmental factors. Wujin demolition charges are set on the eastern approach. Detonate when the enemy mech reaches the fuel depot. Standing by. Duhayan, I need you to create a distraction at the main gate. Draw. Their attention away from Jeho's position, already moving. It was like watching a conductor directing an orchestra, each movement precise and purposeful. But this wasn't music. It was warfare elevated to an art form. Then the Raiders deployed their ultimate weapon. A massive combat mech standing 12 meters tall and armed with enough firepower to level city blocks broke through the facilities. Outer perimeter, its armor was thick enough to withstand orbital bombardment, and its weapon systems could track and eliminate multiple targets simultaneously. Velthar's remaining warriors immediately began falling back. Even Morgax, brave as he was, couldn't face such overwhelming mechanical superiority. The Beast Warrior's natural weapons, which could tear through starship hulls, were useless against armor designed to withstand direct hits from capital ship weapons. But Hannah didn't retreat. She didn't charge forward in a suicidal attack. Instead, she did something that chilled Veltor to his core. She smiled, Te-Min, Wujin, Pattern 7. The two humans moved with synchronization that seemed almost telepathic. They had fought together for so long that words were unnecessary. While the massive mech focused its weapons on their previous positions, tracking heat signatures and movement patterns, the two humans simply weren't there anymore. They flanked the machine from angles that exposed its weak points, joints in. The armor plating, cooling vents, sensor arrays that needed to remain unprotected to function properly. But these weren't obvious vulnerabilities that any warrior could spot. These were design flaws that the humans had somehow identified by studying the wreckage of similar mechs throughout the battle. They had been learning. Every destroyed enemy vehicle, every fallen raider, every piece of debris had taught them something new about their opponent's technology. And now they were applying that knowledge with surgical precision. Taemin's modified weapon sent a concentrated beam directly into the mech's primary power coupling. Woojin's explosive charges, placed with mathematical precision, severed the hydraulic lines that controlled the machine's massive legs. The 12-meter Titan collapsed like a falling building, its death throes crushing two raider squads that had been advancing in its shadow. The sound of the mech's destruction echoed across the battlefield, but more importantly, it shattered something inside the raider forces. These professional soldiers, who had conquered dozens of worlds and faced every imaginable enemy, had just watched their most powerful weapon defeated by two small humans using improvised tactics and jury-rigged equipment. For the first time in the battle, Velthor heard something in the enemy communications that he'd never heard from raiders before: fear. Not the tactical concern of soldiers facing a difficult opponent, but the primal terror of predators who had suddenly realized they were no longer at the top of the food chain. The humans had turned the galaxy's most basic assumption about warfare on its head. It wasn't the strongest or the most naturally armed who would win. It was the most adaptable. The battle was over. But the silence that followed felt heavier than all the explosions that had come before. Velthor walked through the mining facility's wreckage with steps that seemed to echo in the sudden quiet. His four eyes swept across a battlefield that defied everything he thought he knew about warfare. Reinforcement ships descended from the sky like metallic angels, their hulls gleaming in the red sunlight of Kepler 442b. Admiral Ketra's flagship landed with ceremonial precision, expecting to find either a glorious last stand or a complete annihilation. Instead, they found something that would be talked about in military academies for generations to come. The mining colony was secure. The raider fleet was retreating in disarray, and 5 humans were calmly going about the business of cleaning up a battlefield they had no right to survive. Velthor's surviving warriors sat scattered across the facility like broken toys. Morgax leaned against a twisted support beam, his massive frame trembling with exhaustion. Green blood seeped through field dressings that covered wounds no warrior should have lived through. His yellow eyes, once blazing with predatory confidence, now held something Veltha had never seen before. Genuine respect mixed with complete bewilderment. The remaining Sithkari warriors clicked their blade limbs nervously, their compound eyes tracking the humans' movements with fascination. These were creatures whose entire evolution had been shaped by warfare, whose very DNA was written in the language of violence. Yet they watched the 5 humans with the same awe that children might show when seeing magic for the first time. Even the psychic warriors from Proxima 7, beings who could peer into minds across the galaxy, seemed unable to comprehend what they had witnessed. Their glowing eyes followed each human movement, trying to understand consciousness that operated on principles they couldn't grasp, but the humans themselves moved through the aftermath with the same calm efficiency they had shown throughout the battle. Hannah knelt beside a wounded raider whose breathing came in shallow, painful gasps. The alien's multiple arms clutched at a chest wound that was obviously fatal. But instead of leaving the enemy to die alone, she offered water from her own supply. Rest. Easy, warrior, she said in the raider's own language. Her pronunciation perfect, despite having learned it from intercepted communications just hours earlier. Your fight is over. Your pain will end soon. The dying raider's multiple eyes focused on her with surprise, then something that might have been gratitude. In 40 years of warfare, Velthor had never seen a victor show such compassion to a defeated enemy. Tay-Min had found a partially destroyed communication array and was rebuilding it using parts scavenged from the battlefield. His hands moved with practiced precision, creating connections between technologies that had never been designed to work together. Within minutes, he had established contact with the retreating raider fleet, offering medical assistance to their wounded in exchange for safe passage. "I don't understand," Morgak said quietly, his earlier bluster completely gone. His voice carried the confusion of a predator who had discovered that prey could be more dangerous than hunters. "My hide can stop plasma fire that would vaporize lesser beings. My claws can cut through steel plates. My strength can crush starship components with bare hands." He gestured toward the humans with one massive arm, the movement slow and deliberate. "But them, ... they're so fragile. I could break any one of them with a single blow. Their skin tears, their bones break, their blood flows red when they're wounded. They should have died in the first minutes of battle." Velthor watched Duhayan, patiently teaching a young Sithkari warrior how to modify his natural blade limbs for better accuracy. The humans showed no fear of the razor-sharp appendages that could slice him in half, instead treating them like precision instruments that needed fine-tuning nearby. Wujin and Jeho worked together to stabilize a collapsed section of the mining, a facility that threatened to crush wounded raiders trapped beneath the debris. They didn't differentiate between friend and enemy. Every injured being received the same careful attention, the same determination to preserve life. "No," Velthor said slowly, understanding finally dawning like a sunrise in his consciousness. "We're the fragile ones." The revelation hit him with the force of an orbital bombardment. His warriors, for all their natural advantages, were limited by the tools evolution had given them. The Sithkari fought with blade limbs, the Venom Lords with acid, the Psychic warriors with mental powers. Each species was locked into patterns that had been written into their genetic code over millions of years, but humans had no such limitations. They possessed something far more dangerous than natural weapons or evolutionary advantages: the ability to adapt, to innovate, to transform any situation into an opportunity through pure force of will and creativity. They didn't just fight to win battles. They fought to survive, and in that survival, they became something that transcended the limitations of biology. Every challenge made them stronger. Every obstacle became a tool. Every defeat became a lesson that made future victory more likely. Admiral Ketra emerged from the flagship with a full honor guard, expecting to conduct either a memorial service or a victory celebration. Instead, she found Velthor standing in respectful silence as Hannah approached with measured steps. "Commander," Hannah said, her uniform still stained with battle dirt and enemy blood, but her eyes clear and focused with the satisfaction of a job. "Well done. The Raiders' fleet is in full retreat. All primary objectives have been secured with minimal casualties to defending forces." Velthar looked at this small human female who had just redefined everything he thought he knew about warfare. Then he did something that shocked every alien present. Something he had never done in 40 years of commanding the galaxy's finest warriors. He saluted her. The gesture was precise, formal, carrying the full weight of military tradition and hard-earned respect. "It was an honor to fight beside you," he said, his voice carrying across the battlefield for all to hear. Hannah's smile was gentle but tired, the expression of someone who had given everything and somehow found it was enough. She looked back at her team: Tommen, Duhayan, Wujin, and Und. For ordinary humans who had just proven that the most dangerous weapon in the galaxy wasn't evolution or technology, but the refusal to give up. "The honor was ours, Commander." As the transport ships prepared for departure, Velthar made a note in his official mission log that would change the course of galactic warfare. Recommendation: recruit more humans immediately. Priority Alpha. In the cargo bay during the journey home, Morgax approached the human team with uncharacteristic humility. The massive beast warrior who had terrorized battlefields across 3 star systems stood before them like a student seeking wisdom from masters. "How do you do it?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "How do you fight so hard when you're so ... He struggled for words that wouldn't sound insulting. "Human," Taman suggested with a tired smile that held no mockery, only understanding. "Yeah." The 5 humans exchanged glances, silent communication passing between them that spoke of shared hardships, common purpose, and unbreakable bonds forged in the crucible of survival. Then Hannah answered for all of them, her voice carrying the weight of her entire species' history. Because we have to. Because someone has to. And because no matter how outmatched we are, no matter how impossible the odds, we refuse to quit. Not about being the strongest, or the fastest, or having the best weapons. It's about being too stubborn to know when we're beaten. Velthor had battled beside monsters his entire career, beings whose very nature was warfare itself, creatures, evolved for nothing but conquest and destruction. But as he watched these 5 humans tend to their equipment with the same careful attention they had shown to wounded enemies, he realized he had never seen anything more terrifying than a human who had decided not to give up, in a galaxy full of natural-born killers. The most dangerous warriors turned out to be the ones who had to learn how to fight, because they were the only ones who never stopped learning how to win. The end.